everybody who came through that house. As I mentioned, everybody had experiences that they shared during Shiva. So he says that this guy takes him down to the basement. He finds him a spot. He found maybe a pillow, a mattress, either one of the two. And he didn't find exactly a towel with a bar of soap at the end of his bed, like in the hotel. He got used to the idea that he's in a place where it calls for some challenges. And these challenges is what Shlomo had told me was actually crucial to what he grew into in the later years as what he's done. He became what Rabbi Baumgarten had a shpah on him was later something that Shlomo carried through with hundreds, thousands of neshamas himself. He later, about 6 or 7 years ago, the children will correct me, it was one of Rabbi Baumgarten's last trips that he took on a flight. He was in California, and my nephew had a baby boy, so he turns to his father, to Shlomo, and he says, so I want you to be the sandik, to be the Zayda from the Mingle. So he says, but I hear Rabbi Baumgarten is in town. So he says, what does that have to do? So he says, well, it has a lot to do. And he says, you will give the sandukas to Rabbi Baumgarten. So my nephew, who didn't understand much, and then later he told him the reason why Rabbi Baumgarten was to be the sandik of this kid is because Rabbi Baumgarten is the real grandfather of this Rachanimel. And that was just one part of the many stories of people that went through the house that was told to me by Shlomo. And that's why there's so much of that I'm not going to elaborate. I want to just mention a little bit benegay to shaykhs in the shul that where it's more pertaining to my part of standing here and speaking. So I once heard from Rav Lev Groner, the Rebbe's maskir, who's also a brother-in-law, Yibadul Chaim Teimaruchim, to Rav Mendel Baumgarten, who's married to Rav Lev's sister. So he once verbringed, I don't remember if you remember mentioning this, but I remember, and it was a very interesting thing that he mentioned, that it was in the early 40s that the Rebbetzin Shtanesora was there, and there were some Bachrim that were there, and the conversation came up about what Elter Chassidim serve for a nash. Elter Chassidim, very, very good. What do they serve to a nash? And the Rebbetzin Shtanesora said that Medav sein mekusher zum Rebbe, bechdem soll können sein verbunden mit dem Ebersten. The Rebbe is the one that's mekasher each and every year to the Rebbe. The way to have that channel and being connected to the Rebbe, to be mekasher the Rebbe, is through the Zikna Nash, the Chassidish, and that is the influence that us Anash are able to have. So therefore, Rabbi Baumgarten was one that had an influence on many and on people that were mispal in the shul for many years. And I can say my history with him in the shul is kipshute over 50 years. So let me just tell a little bit of a short history of what was going on in Crown Heights. So it was in Tovshin Chavtes, there were a lot of Polish and Garish Yidden. Most of them had their numbers still from the Holocaust, and they survived. And they were the ones living in the Shchuna, and they davened over here in the Novminske Rov, was then the Rov. And they were either Schwarz or Weiss or Gross or Klein or Schwarzmann, Grossmann. Those were most of the names that I remember. And they davened in this shul until one day somehow they found that the Lubavitchers have some sort of a tzaras, or were like so infectious, and they've ran away from Crown Heights, sold their houses, and the shchuna was a churban. And they came to a point where the shchuna was at an all-time high as far as crime goes, besides everything. And the shul were in danger. And there was the Rebbe, I don't remember which year, so one of the boys could remind me, the Rabbi Baumgarten wanted to daven in 770, like every one of the Anash with the Rebbe. And the Rebbe had said to him, Eib du wirst nicht kommen davenen da in dem shul, will ich allein kommen. If you won't come to daven here, I will come here myself to daven. Rabbi Baumgarten didn't need any more, and at that point in time, he became committed to this shul. I had a story, it's a little bit different. I was still a bacher, and I went to the mikveh across the street in Rei Mohuvim, and I'm rushing as a bacher to 770 to catch a place for maftir. I mean, I wasn't tall enough to be able to do this. Some of my friends helped me, keep me up so I can see and hear a little bit. And I'm passing through the shul here. On the porch is standing a fremderid, and he says, Bucher, Kemeran. I said, well, they need a tenth for a minyan. That's what the matzav was then. So he said, ich darf gehen in 770, ich darf hören, aber es maftir. He says, the Rebbe sagen maftir und tom na minyan under. Luckily, I agreed. I came into the shul. I stayed here till after davening. And that Shabbos, the Rebbe was screaming, and he lashed out about young light anash going to be mechazik the shul in the entire Crown Heights. The shul were pushed emptying out. Some of the shul were about to be sold, including this shul, which Rabbi Zalman Garari saved it from being sold to a kirche. And it was a terrible matzav. And the situation was such that, so later on the shul got a minyan, but at a later point, after I got married, so I continued to go to 770. Rabbi Baumgarten met me once, and as mentioned before, Rabbi Baumgarten was not a person of many words, but he connected, he looked at you, you knew what he wanted, and his message was very clear, as come and be mechazik the shul, and we need you to come and daven here. And so I did, and we're talking about, so like I said, Pashut, almost 50 years that we're here together in the shul. Just want to turn back a little bit to benegay to the Achnosus Orchim in the house. In Tres Chitas, I learned a Rashi, which many of you have, but I've just noticed it to be very interesting. And that's benegay to the gather from benegay to the gather of Achnosus Orchim, a Meiridik Rashi. So Rashi says, benegay to a korban eif that somebody brings for a korban, that you should see that you should burn the eif with its wings and the feathers. So I quote here Rashi. Rashi says, "Neitza mamash feathers." Frek Rashi v'alei ein lecho hedyet shemereach reach ra shel knafayim nisrofim ve'ein nafshik kotzolov. There's not a human being that can possibly tolerate the smell, the odor of burnt feathers from a chicken. V'loma omer akosu v'hiktir. And Rashi says, Kidei shehei hamizbeach soveya umuhuder b'karboni shel oni. B'chidei, the mizbeach should be satisfied and with a covered. What's the covered of a mizbeach? The Rebbe says covered is when there's a karboni shel oni. A table at shulchan is demel mizbeach. The household in Rabbi Baumgarten's house was such that it always had people of all kinds. There were some that were oni bedas, some that were oni emotionally, some that needed chizuk. Rabbi Baumgarten, together with his wife, Mrs. Nechama Baumgarten, gave each and one, everyone, as they say in America, TLC, tender love and care, which in each and every one felt very, very special. As I said, my Shlogar Shlema also remembers, the house as being a very, very warm house. And this is Poshtarashi in Teres Chitas that I noticed this is, this is the beauty of a Chassid Eden's Tish, to have it over there, that Korbani Shaloni, somebody that's lacking and that's missing and is not there yet in Inyanim von Das, from Yiddishkeit, or whatever it may be. Anyways, so this is just something I wanted to mention when I get to the table of Rabbi Baumgarten. So there used to be, Rabbi Baumgarten used to come in here very quietly. As mentioned before by his Einikul who started out, Rabbi Baumgarten was not a person, he was not a Baldvarim. He was not a person that spoke too much. He was a very edler person. He didn't, when onarash, everything was very quiet. He used to walk in here with a Rambam, with a Teira Eirel, with a Teira, sit down over there on a side table and sit and learn. But somehow the shul was such that if I don't know all the shul, but I just know that this shul stands out in the way as meret nicht in Davendo. And this was partially, and this was mainly because Rabbi Baumgarten was a Yid who carried the status and a Hadras Koved and a Chassidische Yid, as I mentioned, that meret wegen having a shpur von a Yidden. That was Rabbi Baumgarten. People just felt that there has to be Yerushalayim, Kabbalah Seil, Sashul, and he never ever wanted to talk. He didn't speak. He was known as it's known as the Baumgarten Shul, but not because Rabbi Baumgarten actually stood here by a speaker to speak. Anybody that remembers him will tell you that. But it was his presence that was very valuable. And the people who were attracted to this shul were such that were also serious people, Yungalite, Chassidish Yungalite, that were very serious about the davening and learning. The best that we would get out of Rabbi Baumgarten, the most that we would get, was Rabbi Flint, Zolzang Gesund, Larichas Yom Mishon Teves, used to bring over there by a small table. That was before the Yaakar Malka has expanded this shul, and the Verbringers today are every Shabbos with a long Verbringer. We're zecher that Rabbi Groner, Larichas Yom Mishon Teves, we hope you come more often. But he verbrings with the Elam. But then it was on a side table. Rabbi Flint used to verbring, this was years ago. And we would push Rabbi Baumgarten, he's the shul. And he never used to want to talk. When he was pushed against the wall, he would sit down and chazer asiche from the Mrebben, from Umfang bis and Sof, from Mazbuzay mit Klore de Buren. That's what he would give in public. Didn't make no speeches or anything like that. I felt very, very deeply close to Rabbi Baumgarten, and he tended to feel a koras teva that I didn't run away from the shul, and I stayed with him. He came to all of my first chasnas. I made the first 5 chasnas that I made. He came to each one of every chasna. The 4th and 5th child that I married off, he was already not. It was very difficult for him to move his feet. He suffered with his feet. Those that remember, and pushed it with his last keches. He would come and he participated. The last one he came, pushed for 15 minutes. His children helped him on a wheelchair to walk in, but he came to my house, and I felt it was very, very special that he did that. He used to daven over here. And the highlights were Yom Neiroim. And the Yom Neiroim, so Kol Nidrei, and then would come the Yasore Ruge Malchus. And when Erflag Davnen given mit Pchies, the walls shaked, the Malachim shaked, the heavens shaked. even people as myself, I didn't reach tshuva ilah, but a little tshuva tato I managed to install me during that few minutes, and for that alone I thank him. And the shul had gelebt, and every time he needed to do kedem, he gave an upkommen. His feet was not well, aber gedavnt mit der Geschmack, and that was his influence in his own unique way. How a chassid is supposed to conduct himself, that was his way that he influenced all those that were in the shul and the community at large. This, and like I said, this was already when he wasn't doing very well, but this is tefillas was memorable. Tefillas that were memorable, and that was the achana from here. We used to go to Ne'ilah, and das ist gewesen der achana zum Mekabel sein, the Merem Ne'ilah mit Napoleon's March, and that's what Rabbi Baumgarten has given to us and continues to give to us. I want to mention that the shul was at a stage where it was dilapidated. The shul was caving in. It was leaking. There was nothing going on. And there was a younger man by the name of Yakir Malke, the Rebbe shall give him keches to be mamshich in his aveda, who took the shul and he renovated it. And thank you to the Baumgartens once again, because they also hosted the shul for a full year to daven in their house. And he fixed up the upstairs and the downstairs where the Ezras Nashim are now during the Shloishim. It's actually one of the first events that the downstairs is being done. And Toviel Olav Bracha, he works with Mesiris, Sina, Belev, Nefesh, and we owe him a big ashikeach. Okay. If I have 1 minute, one of the memories from Rabbi Baumgarten was his voice. And let's sing one of the Nigunim that he used to sing on the Necheach Nigunim that we all know, just for the memory of Rabbi Baumgarten's Geschmacker Nigun. Ki ayol tarei galafike moyim keine nafshi sarei lecho elokim Ki ayol tarei galafike moyim Keine nafshi sarege lecho elekim Eitzomo nafshi lelekim lekel Choy masayavai v'yero epnei elekim Masaya v'yero pnei Elokim. One more time. Ki ayol tarei galafike moyim keina nafshi sarei gelecha Elokim. Masaya v'yero Elokim Masayavai V'yero Epnei Elokim Masayavai V'yero Epnei Elokim Seine Kitze raner Sheikh Neofer wo besechum mit des Gaus und dem Rebbe Melch HaMashiach tekem Yad Mamash.
There are some more seats over there if you want to come in a little further. At every family occasion, Rabbi Baumgarten wasn't the one that was the speaker, as you know. But if I recall, a few years ago, 12 years ago, when they were celebrating his Shnas HaShmoinim and all the Eineklach and Nur Eineklach were there, by his birthday, and they asked him to say a few words. And he said literally a few words, which was that the very fact that he was with all his children in Eineklach and Ur Eineklach, it was all worth it. The bracha that any person wants is der Yesharim Yeverach, that they're able to see Eineklach, Kinder, and Baruch Hashem, he was able to see Nachas from his children, his grandchildren, great-grandchildren. So we will ask one of his grandchildren, Rabbi Baumgarten, to share with us a few words.
Seems like it's a common theme, but I'm also not a public speaker. I'm just looking around to see how many people had to say. I'm looking around to see how many people had to say no till Shalom got to me on the list. But, in a letter that to Zaydi's brother, Rabbi Baumgarten, the Rebbe writes about the bracha given to a bar mitzvah bacher, that he should become a chayil, that the order in the bracha is very precise. He should be a chassid, a yirei shamayim, and then a lamdin. First and foremost, a person has to be a chassid. As the Alter Rebbe explains, chassid sarfan, that a chassid will do anything to help another person, even to the point of self-sacrifice or self-harm. That is the basis for yirei shamayim, because Hashem cannot rest any place where there is ego. Hashem cannot rest, and so in order for someone to be a yirei shamayim, he needs to be selfless. He needs to be completely selfless. He needs to be a chassid. And once a person has yirei shamayim, that's when he can become a lamdin. Imein yira ein chachma. If there's no yirei shamayim, there can't be any chachma. And even if one is mechadash chedushim, the Rebbe says that if without yirei shamayim, you're just increasing in tipshus. Zaydi was a chayil. He was a soldier, and he was a soldier in that order. First and foremost, he was a chassid. He was completely selfless. He would do anything for anyone, and he was completely devoted to the Rebbe, and he did everything the Rebbe said with complete Kabbalah soul. And like a soldier, he did everything without any question. In fact, he wouldn't even understand when others would have questions, would hesitate to do something that the Rebbe wanted. He didn't understand it. We all know that Zaydi claimed he never needed an alarm clock. I don't understand. When I go to sleep and say Kriya Shema, when you say B'tay V'al Naketz B'Rachman, you think, what time do I need to wake up? And that's what time I wake up. It works every time. Why don't you do that? He didn't understand that some other people who may be a little bit less disciplined, such methods don't always work. And so that kind of selfless discipline, that's what led him to want to become a shliach. That's what led him to write to the Rebbe numerous times and say that he's willing to go on the Rebbe's shlichus wherever the Rebbe wants, to do whatever the Rebbe wants him to do. Anything. It didn't make a difference. But I would say that it wasn't just that selflessness wasn't just what drove him to become a shliach, but that was his shlichus. Although he did give classes, and he was a personal mentor, and he warmly interacted with thousands of people, he wasn't a renowned orator, he wasn't a mashpia, he wasn't a famously charismatic personality. He was a simple chassid who opened his heart and his home to anyone, and that's what he modeled to everyone that he met. The Shabbos after my Zayda Reda, Ben Zion Reda, passed away, many of his grandchildren were sitting at the Shabbos table, and they sang the Pastach. And as I was singing it, my uncle, Bunim Weinbaum, started getting very emotional. And he explained afterwards that shortly after he got married, he came to Crown Heights for the first time with his wife. And he wasn't yet Lubavitch, although he grew up in a frum house, but he wasn't a Lubavitcher chassid. He was staying on Carroll Street. I believe it was at the Rabashkin's house. And he asked, he wanted to go to the mikveh. He asked where the mikveh is. They told him on the corner, Carroll and Schenectady, and he starts walking. And as he gets closer to the corner, he sees police cars blocking off every part of the intersection. And he sees, in the middle of the intersection, he sees there's someone laying on the ground, and he's surrounded by policemen with their guns drawn. And he overhears one cop shout out, "If you make a move, I'm going to put you in the morgue." And he's a timid Englishman in this new place, and he's getting quite scared, and he's looking for this big sign that says mikveh, and he doesn't see any such sign. And he crosses the road, and he sees the first house that he sees. 1608 Carroll Street. He starts walking up towards the front door, and he sees through the window, he sees a picture of the Rebbe, and he relaxes. He says, "Okay, with these people, I'm safe." And he knocks on the door, and he asks, "Where can I find the mikveh?" And they show him across the road, down the stairs. You go, that's where the mikveh is. And of course, he doesn't just leave with directions to the mikveh, but he leaves with a Shabbos invitation for the coming Shabbos. And as an aside, he made an achlata then that he would, and anyone who's visited his house will know this, that he put up a picture of the Rebbe across from the front door, that when you open the door to his house, you see a picture of the Rebbe and you know where you are. So he comes that Friday night and sitting by the table, and he was blown away by just seeing the whole Shabbos table. The whole scene was all the children singing, and the Divrei Torah, and all the guests. And he was so blown away, and he thought to himself, it was just shortly after he got married, and he thought to himself, "This is what I want to build. This is the type of house that I want to build. I want to sit by a Shabbos table, be surrounded by family, and singing Nigunim. This is what I want to build." And so he said then that Shabbos, after my grandfather passed away, he said, "I'm sitting down here with most of my children here, and I'm sitting at a Shabbos table, and we have the Divrei Torah, and we have the children, and we're singing the same nigun that we sang then, that Shabbos, the Pasach." So as the Rebbe Shliach, Zaidi modeled what it means to be a chassid, what it means to build a chassidish house, what it means to raise a chassidish family. He showed the richness of living such a life, of living as an uncompromising chassid, and he showed that such a life is attainable to everyone. In the Yom Yom of Gimel Adar Rishon, which is the day that Zaidi passed away, it says, "Rabbeinu Azaken Amar, mitzvahs avas Yisrael hu liyilid am Yisrael asher ma'elam lo yira esay u'mikol shekein lechaver adas Yisrael asher b'makim meguray shehu ben oibas adasay." The Alter Rebbe said, the mitzvah of avas Yisrael extends to anyone born into Am Yisrael, even if you have never met him. How much more so does it extend to every member, man or woman, of the Jewish community where you live, who belongs to your community. As a chassid, and uniquely as a shliach to this neighborhood of Crown Heights, Bubby and Zaidi opened their home, and they showed Avas Yisrael to every member, man and woman, of this community. Just want to finish off just saying thank you. Thank you to Zaidi for showing and for modeling that life of a chassid, and for making it quite easy to think of lessons to learn from him. And we know that selfless dedication, that selflessness has already been passed on to his children, the way they cared for Bubby and Zaidi, and Mitzvah Hashem should carry on to the rest of us.
I know how to do it. Shkoyach Yonason for adjusting the microphone. Talking of a pashtus, simplicity but to the point which drives the point home. Recently, I saw it was being passed around as well, but the passport of Rabbi Baumgarten was seen where he writes, in case of emergency, 770 Eastern Parkway. And for him it wasn't a joke. It was in all seriousness, in case of emergency, who should somebody call? What's somebody else going to help him? It's the Rebbe, the one that's going to help him if, God forbid, something needs to be done. Every person in life, Pirkei Avos tells us, "Uknei lecha chaver," they should have a friend, a yidid. And many people were his friends, and he was a friend to many. We'll ask a friend of Rabbi Baumgarten, Olav Hashalom, to share with us a few thoughts on his life and in friendship. We'll ask Rabbi Flint, the Eibusher should give him a refuah shleima, Riches Yom Shalom Tevis, to share with us a few words.
When Rabbi Baumgarten called me on Thursday night and asked me if I would speak, I didn't understand why he asked me. We have Rabbi Groner, other chassid people. So that reminds me, once Rabbi Herschel Schechter from the Bronx, there are two Rabbi Herschel Schechters, one from Shiva University and one from the Bronx. The one from the Bronx was famous for being one of the liberators, probably the chaplain of the American Army that liberated the concentration camps. And they brought him to speak one time in Holy Torah, and he started by saying like this. But having mentioned him, I want to digress for a moment. After he spoke, he was speaking to a few people privately, and he told us incident that he was speaking to the Rebbe, and he told the Rebbe that how highly he thought of Reb Shmuel of Witten. How highly he thought of Reb Shmuel of Witten. So he said the Rebbe answered him with the story of Rabbi Kiva, where Rabbi said that he wants to see the Eibusher. So Rabbi Kiva said, no problem. But first, take a good look at the sun. So he said, I can't look at the sun. It's going to blind me. You can't look at the sun. She says, and you want to see the Eibusher? And this is what the Rebbe meant. Reb Shmuel, yeah, but who sent Reb Shmuel and who is Reb Shmuel's Rebbe? So if you hold so highly of Reb Shmuel, Alachas Kamekama, Reb Shmuel's Rebbe. But what he started off, Rabbi Herschel Schechter was telling the following incident. There was a Maggid who needed to go make a drush in a different city. And he hired a horse and buggy, a horse and wagon to take him. He wasn't a wealthy Maggid, so he didn't get the Porsche, the Lexus of horses. He got an old, dilapidated horse. And as they were walking along, every once in a while, they came to an uphill, so the Balagola said to the Maggid, let's get out and walk, because it's too hard for my horse to schlep. And this happened a lot of times, that they had to get out and walk because there was something on the road that made it difficult for the horse. All right, finally they came to their destination, and the Maggid pays the Balagola, and he says, there's one thing I don't understand. I had to come here because I have a drasha to make. You had to come here because you have to make penasa, you have to support your family. Why did we bring the horse over here? I don't remember the first time I saw or heard of Rabbi Baumgarten, but I do know my first recollection, and at that time I already knew who he was, and this was on Tainus Esther. A few Bachim in 770 were asked to go, I think it was Rutgers University, for Kriyas HaMegillah. And afterwards, they didn't call it Mivtzoyim in those days. It was before the word Mivtzoyim. It was a tzach pu'ula. We would go on tzach pu'ulas. So we went there, Tainus Esther. And of course, Rabbi Baumgarten was the Balkaira. And we, of course, have a different minig in the Megillah than they do, that we only make noise by certain Hamans, Haman ben Hamdaz, and they had by every single one. So that, when you're fasting Tiny Sester and you're accustomed to the Lubavitcher way, another way gets on your nerves. So somebody got up and said, no, stop banging by every Haman, but Rabbi Baumgarten would not have it. This was their minig, and he showed the person who was asking everybody to be quiet by all the other Hamans that they should do their minig, and the fact that he was fasting and standing on his feet, he didn't care. Now later on, Rabbi Baumgarten became a relative of mine because my wife's grandfather, Gott Lange Yarn, is Rabbi Groner's first cousin. They were roommates because my wife's grandfather was stuck here during World War II because he came before the war and then he couldn't go back till after the war. And I understand spent quite a few nights in the same room as Rabbi Groner. And Baumgarten, the family accepted me warmly. Remember many times that Moshe Groner would say to me, "Mechutin, you're causing trouble." Now, when we're speaking about Rabbi Baumgarten, there's a lot of things we can talk about. Some of the things were touched upon, others not yet. I mean, this thing applies to many people, and to many people here. But yet, to Rabbi Baumgarten, it applies much more. And if you don't understand it, I can explain it to you. But what I'm talking about is Kol HaKiveya Mokim L'Tfilosai L'Kei Avram Be'ezroi. Okeshemeis Aimrum Loi. I don't say it says Aimrum Loi, but that's what it says. Okeshemeis Aimrum Loi I chassid, I onav Mitamidav Shel Avram Avinu. So Rabbi Baumgarten had this Mokim Kavua, and he personified Kol HaKiveya Mokim L'Tfilosai. Having mentioned the scene about davening in the Mokim Kavua, so I remember I used to, Baruch Hashem, I was able to be a simultaneous translator of the Rebbe's Sichos for 10 years. So I remember when the Rebbe spoke about this Inyan, about being Kiveya Mokim L'Tfilosai, and at that time he said, Afilu as ismacht sich hamol, as medavent ma'ariv in Stub, darf es sein a Mokim Kavua. That even if you daven ma'ariv at home, don't just stand one time here and one time over there. You should have a Mokim Kavua in your house where you daven. But of course, we learn from this two things. Amal macht sich as medavent ma'ariv in the heim. But that's not the way it's supposed to be. And you have to have a Mokim Kavua. And of course, if you can't go to shul, the Gemara says, and the halach is you should daven at the same time that the tzibur is davening. Baruch Hashem, Crown Heights, we don't have that problem. It's 24 hours a day. Okay. Hai chassid, hai onov. So, as was mentioned, his anivus. Something that stands out in my mind. I mean, there were people here who are older than I am, old enough to be my father, and they wouldn't want to sit down to a farbrengen that I was speaking. It was just not l'fik feidim. Rabbi Baumgarten had no such problem, and he would sit and many hours. And his dedication, he didn't speak publicly, but he taught. He taught a lot. And he would give a share every Friday night between Mincha and Ma'ariv, sitting in his place. And his dedication, an example of his dedication, one day Rabbi Zev Katz calls me, and he says that he asked Rabbi Baumgarten to be the Bal Tefillah for Kabbalah Shabbos, but Rabbi Baumgarten said he can't, because he's giving a share. So he said, if I find you a Mamala Mokim, will you come daven in 770? So he said, yes. So he called me and he asked me to give that share that Friday night, and Rabbi Baumgarten went to daven Kabbalah Shabbos in 770. Another thing, and I'm surprised that I don't think anybody mentioned it, But this was mentioned in the comments after it was posted on the various sites about Rabbi Baumgarten passing away, about his Kabbalah soil. And a few people used the expression that he was a Goen in Kabbalah soil. Some people are going in one thing, some people are going in another thing. There's a chassidish word that, of course, doesn't apply to us. And you'll hear what I mean in a moment. There's a Polish word that says, Dein Rosh Yeshiva is a Goen in Hamachlef Pora B'Chamor, and unser Rebbe is a Goen in Vahaftas Hashem Elikecha. In other words, they made it that in Hamachlef Pora B'Chamor he's far from a Goen, but he's a Goen in Vahaftas Hashem Elikecha. Of course, that does not apply to us. So regarding the Kabbalah soil, one of the things I always marveled, Rabbi Baumgarten would sit there every single week and do the Chassidish Parsha, whether it was Torah or whether it was Torah, and he would jot down where he's up to. I mean, do you have the records of what he... In other words, he finished the Parsha every week and would make a note where he's up to so that when he comes back to learning it the next time, he would know what the place was. So... one of the things that the Rebbe once said by Fabrengen, and I chassid it over here because I did a little chazar between Mincha and Ma'ariv. The Rebbe said at that time that those who passed away recently, it's easier for Tchias HaMesim. Right? That's what the Rebbe said. So when I repeated what the Rebbe said, somebody said, what are you talking about? I mean, well, what sense does that make? And what's pshat? It's easier for the Eibishter, harder for the Eibishter. Rabbi Pinyakov was here. He also would come to listen to the Chazara. So he said, what does it mean when he says, Koshel is Zavgan Kekriyas Yamsov? I mean, for the Eibishter, it doesn't make a difference. But yet we see, whatever the explanation is, that Koshel is Zavgan Kekriyas Yamsov for the Eibishter. And Rabbi Baumgarten left Shluchim, got New York covered, Manhattan, Long Island, and obviously a lot of nachas from the children and grandchildren, and Kisvan Sheikh Niyafa, who B'Seichem taken from Yad Mamish.
Before we continue with the siyum, on behalf of the family, we'd like to thank the shul for hosting and accommodating all these years and everything else. So we'd like to call upon Shneur Zalman Baumgarten to lead us in the siyum.
I'm not speaking. I'm just. Before I begin the siyum, first of all, I want to give a big yasher koyach. He's sitting right here, Dr. Dubrov. We have a big thanks. He helped my father for many, many years, and my mother, Allah Shalom. So we want to thank you very much. I'll be very short, but before I do the siyum, I would like to just tell a story. This Shabbos is Shabbos Pasha Zocher. We're coming close to Purim, and also very close to Pesach. I'd like to tell a short story. Amongst the tens of thousands of people who passed through the house, there was one fellow, his name was Professor Rosenblum. I don't know if anybody remembers him. We remember very well. Professor Rosenblum and his wife, Rivel. And he had a son then. We saw him before I was bar mitzvah. He had a son, he's called Yoel David. We called him Lee David. And his daughter is Judas. He had an older daughter. Anyway, so he used to come for many, many years, Pesach. And during the year, he used to come to our house. And he used to come out of Pesach. And he used to go for matzahs. Stand on the line. Which is very interesting is, he used to go with his son, Lee David. When he went by the Rebbe, he had a lot of kiruvim from the Rebbe. He used to get 2 full matzahs, ganze matzahs, And his son, before Bar Mitzvah, used to get a whole matzah. It just went on for years. Many years. And one of the years, I don't know what time it was, which year it was. So my father, everybody stood in line to get matzah. So my father also was standing in line to get matzah. So one year he passes by, and when he comes by the Rebbe looks at him and says to him, "The professor is Badir. Is the professor staying for Pesach in your house?" So without thinking, he says, "Yeah, you know." And the Rebbe breaks out in this tremendous smile from ear to ear and says, "Nu, der Erich kriegt a ganze Matze. Warum soll der Balabos nicht kriegen a ganze Matze?" He said, and the Rebbe gave him a full ganze Matze. And just talking about, I don't know if you remember him, he was an absent-minded professor, this Professor Rosenblum. Just Paul, right. So one short story. So in the house next door, my father used to sit by the table, and to his left, a little kid, I used to sit there, and right next to him, next to me, was Professor Rosenblum. He was sitting there. Anyway, one time my mother, was serving the soup, and he was always in deep thought. My father, every Shabbos, Friday night, used to say a sikha, and he was always in deep thought, thinking. Anyway, everybody finished the soup already. Suddenly, he pops up and he says, and his wife, he's sitting on one end of the table, and his wife is sitting at the other end of the table. And he starts yelling, he says, "Rivel, I don't understand. I'm eating the soup, and look, I have a full plate of soup." So she looks at him and says, "Paul, if you would use a spoon instead of a fork." Okay, machen wir siyum. Omer Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Osid HaKodesh Baruch Hu lahandchil l'chol tzadik v'tzadik shloish meyes v'asora elemis. Shenemar. Lahandchil oiva yesh v'atzriseim amali. I just remember by Fabrengen one time, the Rebbe spoke about this mission, and the Rebbe said, the Rebbe is going to give every tzaddik 310 worlds, oilemis. And the Rebbe gave a big smile and said, "I don't know what I would do with one world." Omer Reb Shivi B'Chalafte, Le'motza Kodesh Baruch Hu Kli Machzik Brocha L'Yisroel Ela HaSholim, Shenemar, Adonai Oiz L'Yam Yitein, Adonai Yevorech Es Ami V'Sholim. Yechi Adeinu Mereinu V'Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Leilom Voed. Yechi Adeinu Mereinu V'Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Leilom Voed. Yechi Adeinu Mereinu V'Rabbeinu Melech HaMashiach Leilom Voed. Rabbi Yisai Sedol Chaim, so we can verbeißen. Yeshekoyach everybody for coming. Yen Av Simchis.
I thought they could call me.
Where's your shul? You daven with us, right? Every day we daven with this shul. 7:30 we start in the minyan. Right? Friday, we were there the last Friday that he davened. What time did he finish